My name is Anna. I'm the facilitator of idtalks, and together with my colleagues Maria, and Olaja, we are happy to return to your screens like every other Wednesday in springs and autumns. This autumn, we are going to talk about creating inclusive international youth projects. We have partnered with Strategic Partnership on Inclusion and their project that is called ID Travels. And together, with their help, we have identified speakers that could talk about different topics and make this a series of 5 online workshops on 5 major topics to promote inclusive and diverse practices in international youth work. Today's talk is quite special because it is focused on the 2 programs of the European Union designed for young people and in their essence, purposefully addressing young people with fewer opportunities. Today, we are talking about inclusive administration from budget to logistic. When we plan an international youth experience in an inclusive and diversity sensitive manner, we are sometimes worried that this can cause extra expenses, extra administration, and sometimes we are worried that the burden will be too much and the logistical requirements will be too high for youth organization to handle it. So what special funding, what special support exists there to support inclusive youth projects within European Solidarity Corps and Erasmus Plus Youth, and what are the rules to follow, and what can you know or what should you know to make your projects more inclusive, but less worrying in terms of financial implications, logistics, and bureaucracy. And today we have 2 great speakers joining us to talk about it. With us are Elzbieta Kosek. She is a practitioner from the field, working as an executive director and senior project manager at Kreisau Initiative. It's a Berlin-based organization that is dedicated to strengthening democracy, for fostering European dialogue, and promoting social inclusion. Ellie, as we call her, has almost 20 years of experience and is specializing in international youth work. She will tell you more about it. And alongside with her, alongside with all the beneficiaries of the program, is a representative of the National Agency of Erasmus Plus Youth, Erasmus Plus Sport, and European Solidarity Corps, Hanna Schuessler. I hope I pronounced that right. Hanna is working for over 5 years now as advisor on inclusion and diversity for the national agency. She's also involved in a number of inclusive initiatives, counseling, and support European and national working groups on inclusion and diversity. So without further ado, I first pass the floor to Hanna, and then subsequently we will hear from Elzbieta as well.
Yes, thank you very much, Anna, also for pronouncing my name so wonderfully. So, hello everyone. I'm Hanna from the German National Agency for Erasmus Plus Youth Sports and the European Solidarity Corps. And I'm very happy to have the opportunity to present especially the funding mechanisms for inclusion and diversity within the European youth programs. As there is really quite a lot of possibilities for funding for inclusive measures in your projects, but unfortunately they are not as well known as we would like them to be. And that's also certainly due to the fact that they are somehow complex. But yeah, I hope to shed some light on them today. In the time that we have, it's difficult to explain fully what there is, but I think you will get a good overview. And then we always recommend to turn to your national agencies in your countries if you want to apply for a project and also apply for the special inclusion funding. And then I'm very happy that Ellie will give some really concrete examples of how you can use this funding and how you can make your projects inclusive and administer them in an inclusive and diversity sensitive way. I think that all or most of you who assist today already know a little bit about the EU youth programs. And then you certainly will have seen that inclusion and diversity is really a big priority in the programs. What does that mean? The programs are open to all persons, all young persons especially. And that also means for persons organizing projects that the idea is that you reach out to and support a really diverse range of young persons, and that you can reduce barriers to participation in your projects. For that, we have the inclusion support. And the idea of the inclusion support is to really facilitate this possibility of giving fair opportunities of participation to persons regardless of their individual circumstances. And this should be done via funding of measures, support programs, activities that in the projects can be undertaken to make it easier or even possible for young people with few opportunities to participate in the projects. Now you've already heard some times this concept of persons with few opportunities. In the EU youth programs, this is directly linked to inclusion and diversity. And these persons with few opportunities are defined as persons who are at a disadvantage compared to their peers. And this can really be due to very different barriers that these persons are facing. For example, related to socioeconomical background, to geographical factors like living in a rural area with less access to infrastructure, or a disability, also a migrant status. So these factors that lead to a disadvantage can be very diverse. And now let's talk about money. So there's mechanisms for inclusion support as well as in Erasmus Plus Youth, as in the European Solidarity Corps. They follow a little bit the same principles, but are slightly different. And I will start with Erasmus Plus Youth. In Erasmus Plus Youth, you have two mechanisms. You have a lump sum, which you will get in your projects for each participant with few opportunities participating in a mobility activity. For example, in a youth exchange, but also in a youth workers mobility, in a participation project, or if you know the formats in Discover EU Inclusion Action. So for each participant that you will let's say, mark as a participant with few opportunities, you will receive this lump sum, which is currently at 125 euros per activity. And this is called the inclusion support for organizations. The idea is that you can really use that for the efforts you have as an organization to make your project inclusive. But that's not necessarily enough if you really want to work inclusively. So there's also the inclusion support for participants. And with that, you can get funding of the real costs up to 100% of the costs that you have that are directly linked to the needs of participants with few opportunities in your project, or their accompanying persons. So, for example, you have a participant with a hearing impairment, and you provide sign language interpretation. These are quite high costs, and you can apply for them on a real cost basis. So you put in all the costs that will occur, and you get funding for that. We will have more examples later on, and also Ellie will really show what that means in reality. So I will go on for now. In the European Solidarity Corps, as I said, there are similar principles. So let's look at the volunteering activities in the European Solidarity Corps, for example, individual volunteering or also team volunteering. You have also lump sums for participants with few opportunities participating in your projects. These lump sums are called inclusion support in the European Solidarity Corps, but other than in Erasmus Plus, in the European Solidarity Corps, they are for now exclusively connected to what we call reinforced mentorship. So in a volunteering project, you always have mentors. That's really part of the basic principle of a volunteering project. So as an organization, you're supposed to provide mentoring for your volunteers. But in some cases, persons with individual needs, with few opportunities, they might need quite some more mentorship than other participants in order to be able to really participate well. And for that, you can get this lump sum for reinforced mentorship. For example, accompanying the volunteers closer in their daily tasks, having many more meetings than usual with the mentors, etc. So that's the lump sum you can get in the European Solidarity Corps. You also, as in Erasmus Plus, have the possibility to apply for funding of real costs connected to inclusion. This is called, or this is under the category of exceptional costs within the European Solidarity Corps. And there's two options. One is to apply for exceptional costs connected to necessary adjustments or investment in physical assets. That's maybe a bit difficult to understand what is meant by that. But this is, for example, also, well, can use the sign language interpretation example again. We actually, in Germany, we have a very good project that provides opportunities for deaf volunteers. And in quite some situations, they need sign language interpretation throughout the project. So they apply for these costs through the exceptional costs. And they, if it's about that, or for example, you would have a volunteer with a visual impairment, and the person needs a computer with the equipment for visual impairments. That can be costly, and you can apply for that through the exceptional costs. And these things, you can get them additional to the inclusion lump sum for reinforced mentorship. There's a second possibility. If your costs for reinforced mentorship are that high that the lump sums you would get for them do not cover at least 80%, then you can also apply for these costs as exceptional costs. So you would get 100% of these costs because they are especially high, but then you get these exceptional costs instead of the lump sum for reinforced mentorship. this is for you to get an idea. So if it's not 100% clear how it works, I always recommend to turn to your national agency and ask again. Also, if you're uncertain, what is fundable, what might not be fundable, always consult your national agency before applying. That's always a good advice because like that, they can help you yeah, also calculating what's possible and what might not be possible. In general, for the lump sums in Erasmus Plus and in the European Solidarity Corps, you don't need to provide invoices or anything alike. But for the inclusion support for participants and the exceptional costs, so the real costs, you always need to have invoices or contracts so that you can prove the costs that have occurred. Then we have within the European Solidarity Corps the solidarity projects. These are these local projects that can be applied for by young persons themselves. We don't have an inclusion lump sum for those kind of projects, but you can always also apply for exceptional costs for necessary adjustments in order to make the project inclusive. And if these adjustments are necessary for members of the group that implements the projects, then they will get you can get 100% of these costs refunded. If these measures are necessary for the target groups of the project, so for example, this project group organizes, let's say, an inclusive sport event, and for the target groups, the people participating in the sports event, they need to do adjustments. Then they can also be funded, but only up to a maximum of currently 7,000 euros. So there's a maximum grant for that, which is important to know. Yeah, let's see, have a look at some more examples of real costs that you could get funding for. We already had these two first examples of sign language interpretation. Can also be language interpretation if it's, for example, a project with refugees and you would need an interpretation for the Arabic language, for example. We had the Braille displays for computers. It could also be increased costs for expensive specific dietary needs like gluten-free diet or halal food. We had this in a project once. There was a rental of wheelchair accessible toilets for an outdoor project. Or sometimes if we have participants that don't have the financial means, it can even be supporting the acquisition of basic travel equipment. So sometimes not having a bag is a reason not to participate in a youth exchange. In the European Solidarity Corps, there's online language course offer, but not for all volunteers. This might be the best option. So if there's the need for specific language courses, that can also be applied for through the inclusion support. What is very important to know is that at the national agencies, the people that evaluate the applications are not necessarily all very acquainted with all the barriers young persons might be facing in order to participate in a project. So it is really important that you argue why this inclusion funding is necessary, for whom, which measures you are implementing, and how they facilitate the participation for the corresponding participants. This is really, I cannot stress that enough. This is important for us at the national agencies to see that there's really a need and to allow this funding to be granted. And this is at application level, but also again on the level of the final reporting. You can also get funding for accompanying persons within both programs. So, for example, if a person needs a personal assistant or a socio-pedagogical assistant, that can be funded through the programs. And you can get funding for travel and subsistence of these persons, for the remuneration of these persons. And there's different ways of applying for them, either through a known category or through exceptional costs. I will not go further into detail because that would take far too long. But it's important that you have seen it, that you know about it, and in case you need it, you can see or ask your national agency how to apply for it. Another really interesting possibility is to get funding for preparatory visits, because especially for inclusive projects, it might be good to come together at the venue where the project will take place, to see the conditions of the venue and to maybe see what needs to be adopted, what activities can be undertaken there, etc. And for that, you can visit the project venue. You can also take young persons participating in the projects with you. So, for example, if you have a blind volunteer, you could visit the venue with this blind volunteer and talk together with in organizations involved about the measures that would need to be taken in order to adapt the project to the needs of this volunteer. And that's possible in Erasmus Plus youth exchanges and in mobility projects for youth workers, as well as in European Solidarity Corps volunteering activities. Once again, the national agency of the applying organization is always the one that evaluates the grant of inclusion support. So if there's doubts or questions on what can be funded and how you should also argument it, for example, in the application, please really consult your responsible national agencies about the eligibility of the costs. That's important because it's always easier to talk something through before the application than to have a not enough argumentation in the application and then get a no for what you're applying for. So with that, I think I hand over to you, Ellie, and we'll see a little bit what all of that means in practice.
Yes, so my name is Ellie, or Elzbieta Kosek, how I was nicely already introduced. I work for an organization based in Berlin, which was already also mentioned, and I am the head of inclusion, and I'm in inclusive youth work since, too long, a very, very long, nearly 16 years already, very specific on this topic. And so I am very happy I can be here and share with you a little bit of the knowledge I had the privilege to experience and discover on my journey through inclusive projects. Before we start, maybe just give you the scale of the projects I'm doing. Most of the projects I'm doing, the inclusive projects I'm doing over the year, are projects with the maximum amount of young people. So it's like always 60 young people from 5, 6, 7 different countries, age 13 to 30, disabilities, fewer opportunities, disadvantages, but also, and this is what I strongly believe is an important part of inclusion, also those who have or not experienced exclusion maybe, and that on that level in society, or either are more on the privileged side on society, because I also believe that those who have a voice already need to be part of the process and part of the youth exchanges to understand each other, and maybe also to advocate on a later level for each other. So yes, I brought a little quote from at the beginning with me, because I think this quote is kind of in a nice way showing the transformative nature of inclusion. And like, we are going to talk about administration from budget and logistic, and besides that, it sounds from the title maybe to be a kind of a very dry, let's say, topic, and it's also what I know from other project managers, not always the most beloved topic. It is, though, a very important topic, because for me, or because it is basically not just for me, it is the backbone of every project. So it forms basically the structural support that keeps everything organized and functioning smoothly. So the better I do the administration, the better I do the planning in a way also. Often, hopefully, the better the project and the more smoothly the project runs. And this is especially, this is to emphasize, especially important, because inclusive projects need even more careful planning on some points. And also the coordination on some levels is more crucial, maybe if you compare them to maybe more homogeneous projects, but not generally. Just, so this quote, for me, it highlights a very important idea. That inclusive administration basically reshapes the way how we can design activities, and rather than like just adding people into already existing frameworks. It is the basis of inclusion in general, is create new spaces, new frameworks where people are welcome and be belonging. So one thing which is not only on the administrative level, but also on the implementation level in inclusive work, very important for me, is always the question, how did we do it until now? Who is still missing? Why? And then maybe to look, if these people are missing, what does one have to do with the other? So what can we change maybe on the level of administration or implementation, that the others who are missing can join? And how can we adapt processes? How can we adapt structures? How can we adapt maybe, and also our budgets to allow those who are still missing to join? So this question is something which always is with me on my journey through the inclusive youth exchanges, and I also want just to recommend it, to always have it in mind when you look on the next step through the presentation. So Hannah is not to be repeated what Hannah already said. She painted it all out. I just want to go a little bit then in some more examples maybe. Administration is a broad topic, and there are many, many more topics than we can cover here today. So Hannah and I will be also there at the end, and happy when we miss something to answer your questions. For me, it's important also to highlight my experience as an international youth exchange, inclusive international youth exchanges, not so much in the ESC, in the European Solidarity Corps, but also here. If you have later on questions, we try to answer them based on the experience we have. So starting with the budget, there's one sentence in the beginning: inclusion should be mentioned already in the application. And This is, of course, when you are on, so maybe you know in Erasmus Plus you have the single application still, and you have the accreditation where you are accredited for for more years until 2027, and then you just go and ask for a certain budget. And I put this sentence down. My organization is accredited since 2021. And I put this sentence down because it is very important when you plan to work inclusive. It is already important to really highlight that on the level of the accreditation, application for accreditation. Of course, when you plan a single project which is inclusive, you will anyway mention inclusion, but here it is also important to already get a little bit deeper in order to then get inclusion support later. So yeah, everything what Hanna already said, it is a very like I have worked with previous programs, and the inclusion support for organization is a newer part of the budget within the Erasmus Plus program, which is very convenient, and it is like the 125 euros per participant. And when you think like on a practical level, so for me, this is like great. And I have like participants who maybe where maybe like the luggage could be a problem to participate, like Hanna earlier said, or we have a little participant fee, but even this participant fee is already too much to pay. So this budget is very helpful with the organization, within the organization of inclusive projects. To support like these smaller needs you might have, or for instance, there's a long journey and your partner organization isn't able, or the group who's coming isn't able to pay for food on their way. These kind of things can be very, very nicely supported with these inclusion support for organization. I put there the sentence on how do you prove fewer opportunities. So it is important at this point. I thought I mentioned it because it was a big discussion also in my organization and at some point, because of course so when you want to create an equitable and inclusive learning space, you normally don't want the people to document or to give you proof of their disabilities or disadvantages. That shouldn't be the case. But on the other hand, you have to bring in the number, right? So you have to say these are the amount of people who have few opportunities. Sometimes it is more obvious because they're coming from very rural areas or they have visible disabilities, but sometimes that isn't so obvious that these specific participants have the few opportunities and need additional support, especially on a planning level where you apply for the money. So like for us to deal with this topic, we decided at some point we create a form, and the form is we work on this with our partners who are participating in one of those in a specific project. So the form is actually highlighting and explaining again what the categories of fewer opportunities might be. And we invite our partners to an assessment of their own group. So because we believe that the group leaders who are coming, the partners we are working with are the one who knows the group best, and who maybe also have contact with the families and are involved in the preparation process. So they rather have also the trust of the young people to share with them if something is difficult. So we use a form where we fill out these kind of assessment form together with our partners. And besides the categories, there's also, they can fill in the number, they can choose the categories, which they think is the area or the categories which apply to their groups, which helps us also later with the reporting and because also on the report level, we have to say which kind of few opportunities are in our projects. So that helps us a lot. We have been thinking also about a way of self-assessing, like invite young people to self-assess them. Happens sometimes, but it's also this kind of, I always have to look at what point do I really do that, because I don't want young people basically have the feeling to enter a project to being already categorized as fewer opportunities. That is something I would like to avoid. So we do it often with the group leaders, with the partners, or with the families. So this is on this topic a little insight. And then, of course, Hannah mentioned the budget, which is the real cost budget. In these projects I do, it is one of the, this is the most important budget, because when I have 60 young people, of course, the whole structure of the project and is a little bit different. So I need a lot of different people who support on many levels. And we have a lot of languages. We have a lot of also people who maybe don't use verbal languages. So there are a lot of needs. So I am actually very much depending and very grateful that this budget exists. I want at this step to highlight one of the most big or the biggest challenges, because of course when you apply for inclusive budget, for inclusion support on a real cost basis, you actually have to know the costs already in advance. This is a big challenge, and I can't really give you an answer how to deal with it, because there is not really a rule or solution, because of course you maybe don't know who will be the exact people who enter your project, but you already have at some point to highlight what costs might appear. And it comes with experiences, of course, that you have in planning. And I can say it at least from the German National Agency, there's also flexibility. So when I put numbers in at the beginning, and then, of course, during the project, the reality change, or I need money for like inclusion support for something else which emerged, and other things fall away. So even if I justified a certain thing on the level of application in the report, if I justify it in the right way, it rarely denied the funding. So there is a certain flexibility, but of course a big challenge how to put the right budget for the project in place. Of course, the recommendation is to work with the partners in advance. They know the young people, they know what need might be in the group, because the idea is, of course, to plan as inclusive as possible from the beginning, to plan for this different cases when you know a little bit more about the group. So when you plan, call it equitable budget, and I wanted to introduce you to why this is important when you plan an inclusive budget, to speak more about equitable budget than about an equal or budget for equality, because of course it is when you have different people in a project, that it's not always that you have to, or you can share the resources in it, like everybody gets the same. You have to acknowledge that people start from different points, and that there might be people in your group who need more support than others, and then the budget is rather to be shared in account to their different needs and their circumstances of the people, to ensure fair access and participation. For me, the key principles of the budget is that it has to be need-based. So what are the needs in my group, or with the people, with the individuals? It has to be designed to reduce disparities, barriers, and obstacles for certain groups. And there need to be a certain kind of flexibility, so I can maneuver around, because especially in inclusive projects, obstacle occur. which we can't plan for in the beginning. Okay, so I wanted to jump with you over some categories. There's no claim to completeness. There might always be others. There might always be more relevant ones for your group, but these are the ones which I'm the most familiar with, which I use often. And also, which kind of categories are important for your inclusive budget? Again, do never assume, talk with your partners, involve the young people in already planning the budget, in identifying their needs, and then look up the costs, work with local services who can actually give you an idea what cost might occur. Looking at the person, and Hannah already in a very beautiful way mentioned a lot of people, and so the accompanying person is a very crucial person when people with different needs and especially disabilities come, and an accompanying person can be a person who helps you with traveling. An accompanying person can also be a person who is supporting your everyday life on a project, let's say. But there are also, and this is something we have just discussed with the national agency, also people who help you to enable the other people to an effective learning process during the mobility. So yeah, we have, of course, the personal assistants, we have language mediators and translators who can be then also applied for, sign language interpreters, communication facilitators. These all are different personnel which you can invite to your project. I learned, and this is also something then maybe to discuss with the national agencies, I learned that all these people you can mark when you look at the report level, not as participants, but as accompanying persons. And you can apply, so they are still part of the budget of the whole project. So it also the lump sums and everything apply for them. Additionally, within the inclusion support, you can, with justification, explain why you need them. And then in important justification in inclusive use exchanges, for instance, because sometimes sign language interpretation might have a more obvious justification, but language mediators in a field where young people come from different backgrounds, there's not necessarily a common language. We cannot assume they all come and speak English. There might be people who are not as fluent, as confident in their mother tongue. So like this is a justification, and it's not just the mediators, language mediators are not just for them, they are for the whole group in order to communicate with each other, which is the main aim of why we're doing this project. We want communication, we want contact. So for these kind of groups, we need to support them, and language mediators are actually a very crucial part of that. Also mental health support, mentors, psychologists. I have often one person who is also a psychologist, or a young person actually who is a psychology student who supports, who learns on the project, and on the other hand supports young people in their process. So she goes in when she sees there's a problem, there's a support needed. So she goes in and supports younger people in their processes, like for instance, somebody's afraid and needs to go for a walk, or somebody needs, like, have just somebody next to him or her to try something new. So this kind of support is very crucial, can also be part of the inclusion support. And then besides, so these people can be accompanying persons, but then you have maybe, like in my projects, I need additional trainers, and maybe you are aware of the rule that within Erasmus Plus Youth Exchanges, you can can have 2 trainers who are facilitating the project, which are part of the budget, but all the others you can't. So you have to pay them out of the project. But one justification for additional trainers is if you want to work inclusive, you might sometimes need more individual support. You need different approaches. You need maybe smaller groups. So you need additional trainers because 2 are not enough. And this is also a possibility to apply for them in inclusion support, as well as for their salaries. But then in that specific case, also for their like travel costs and for the accommodation and food. This would in that case be also part of the, at least this is how we are doing it and what is my experience. Okay, so then the accommodation needs, of course, it is very important to have a look to be as inclusive as possible from the beginning, because you don't know which needs might occur. And so besides the things like when you want to invite people in wheelchairs, ramps, elevators, there are things which are not that obvious, like for instance having quiet spaces for participants who need more quiet, who need spaces to come down. There also light can be a factor, also for lip reading people, that they can see in a good way. But also these kind of obvious things, check if healthcare service on the venue or around is available, because when you need an hospital, it's good to know that it's 8 minutes away, or it's good to know if it's a half an hour away. So these kind of things can influence your planning. And of course, inclusive accommodation aspects, like check how far is the seminar room maybe from the sleeping area, right? How far have people need people to go, and also cultural accommodation, which is like also different types of food or areas to pray, so yeah. And I see I don't have so much time anymore, so I have to jump a little bit even through the program to the topics. Yes, so Hannah mentioned the preparatory visits. In my opinion, it is very, very important to have preparatory visits, to know the locations. Preparatory visits give you also the opportunity to get to know the way, to get to know the journey to the venue. So it's also regarding accessible transportation. It is also very, very important and helpful. Then accessible transportation, like here, like it is like important just to know things like that it's good to plan money, for instance, that you have to plan to reserve an additional seat in the plane, right? You have to know that there is services on airports and trains where you can reach out to them and ask for assistance, right? But it's also good, especially to have a contingency plan. So what happens when the plane is too late? What happens when the bus doesn't go? To have it already in mind, because it's a very stressful thing for participants. And also pre-departure preparation. Not every family might be actually aware about traveling. So this kind of support with visa, passport, travel documents, what do I need, money changing, that is also very important to have in mind, that it's part of the journey. Communication support, besides the things we mentioned already, it is good when you have your communication materials available in different ways. So just don't have just one online form and that's it. Maybe it is easier for people to reach you by calling. Maybe there's a paper form, which is helpful also sometimes for the families. And maybe, and it's good to have like a diversity or inclusive officer, somebody in your project setting to be available for questions in different ways, if they are including questions who appear. Exactly. So these were the different aspects, and want to highlight also what is very, very helpful is to have different relationships with different organizations and to work on practices and structures together with them. My dear colleague Morgan Green had a ID talk like 3 or 4 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, I think, on this topic, and she exploited it very well. So I just wanted to highlight this because different partnerships with different backgrounds helps a lot. And then regarding the team, which is also an important part of the administration part, and also is something which to plan maybe in some budget is the staff development. So it is very important that your team represent diversity and inclusion as well. So like look for these people who can represent the groups and also support your team in training and build up capacities and build up their competences. There's wonderful training Salto Youth is offering on, and so encourage people from your teams to go there and to learn more. And then, of course, you have papers like the Code of Conduct, where you discuss about where you can have agreements together with your team on how to behave, what is important, what to look out, aspects like discrimination, aspects like exclusion can be also part of these kind of Code of Conduct. Safeguarding is an important topic that needs to be discussed. There are wonderful materials out there. We'll put them later in the documentation on this topic as well. And and peer support is also very welcome. So risk management plans is something important where you can like also plan for crises. This is something to do with your partner. And evaluation and feedback, I cannot emphasize that enough, on every level. Just put this mechanism in place, because the people you're working with, they know best what they need, they give it back, and then you have to establish the structures of your administration that they are flexible enough to react on the needs of the group, and that they can be changed. That the structures can be changed easily and adapt easily. Exactly. And as my time has already run out, just pointing out a publication where a lot of these topics are described a little bit deeper, and then we are hoping for all your questions today, maybe together with you, Deepa.
So Annie here is asking for some tips on how to write a project to let me take it literally from the chat. What to keep in mind when you are trying to write a project? What are the main points that can be noteworthy? I imagine how to make sure that you bring across this idea that you're actually doing a project for a group of young people with fewer opportunities. And then we had another question coming from Batahir, and they are asking, I don't know what would be the correct pronoun, whether rural sector youth and Roma youth all would go in this category. It was asked, and Hannah, you were mentioning young people with fewer opportunities. Is that correct? Because Badahir is active in working with these two groups in particular. So maybe these two questions first, and then I have some more lined up for you.
Okay, thank you, Anna. Elia, I will start, but I would love for you to add. Maybe first of all, the question about the young people with few opportunities. It's always about the disadvantage compared to peers, let's say. So it's quite a wide concept within the programs, which is good. Because the idea is really that everyone who has barriers to participation can get the necessary support to participate. So if someone comes from a rural region and therefore has difficulties because, for example, there's no good youth work offer, or in order to even get to to the venue of youth work organization, they have to travel. It can be an argument. What is important is that it's described well why there is a disadvantage and what the measures are to overcome the barriers these youngsters face. So we sometimes get applications saying that this person comes from a certain country and therefore they have few opportunities because of geographical barriers. That's not really an argument, because we know that some countries maybe in general have other opportunities than others, but it's not about belonging to a certain country, but it's about individual needs and individual disadvantages, let's say. So I hope this answers the question. Discrimination can be a massive reason for barriers, for example, also, and for necessary support, for example. About the other question on how to write a project, I would say it's important that throughout the application you see in which way the project is inclusive. So there's only a small part in the application form actually asking about inclusion measures, but it helps a lot for the ones that read the applications and that evaluate the applications to be able to see throughout the whole project description, etc., where you describe how you work with partners, how the project, well, your administration, etc., that you think and plan inclusively. So try to really show this in throughout the application, let's say. But Ellie can certainly add to that.
Yeah, I understood the question a little bit like general also. So I think one of the most important points is always to justify why you want to do the project. Like, what is the reason you want to do it? And I think this is like, if this is the core point, to say this is what is needed, this is for these groups, or this is why I do the project. So I think like focusing on this is for me the most important part, and then all the other parts are kind of built around that, because with the reason why I want to do something, then the target groups becomes clear, which I then describe. Then the topics which I work with will become more clear. So for me, this is like one of the basic aspects of yeah. Of writing an application, yeah. Besides what, and then Hannah, of course, already put in the right parts regarding inclusion. And the other question, I don't have anything to add. I would answer it in the same way, Hannah, that it is not about Roma or people from these areas. It's about their disadvantage.
Yeah, thank you very much. And Annie is also thanking you in the chat. Maybe if I can promote the project that I'm part of for 2 seconds, but there is a training course offered by Salto Inclusion and Diversity that is called Youth Exchanges for All. And we are particularly supporting newcomers in the program to discuss and design inclusive youth exchanges. So yeah, watch out for next year. We will have a couple of offers of those, and you can maybe participate and learn a little bit more about how to do it. Thank you very much. Another question that we have from Swazik, or maybe I'm not pronouncing it very well, is about her trainer career and how being a wheelchair user, sometimes is hindering the work. But maybe because you asked, Swazik, you would like to formulate your question yourself?
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk. I feel it's much easier than on the chat. Well, I had actually 2 questions, but I feel that when I want to apply to Salto trainings, Sometimes it's not, sometimes I know it's indicated that the place is accessible, but sometimes not. And most of the training are not accessible for people with reduced mobility. And each time I have to write an email to ask the person about it. Sometimes they reply, sometimes they don't. And I had the opportunity to go on a training in 2021. I was told in advance the place was not accessible, but it was in Spain, and I had to pay my own taxi from the airport to the place, and it was really, really expensive. And I wonder if this could have been done differently, because I've learned today that there is the budget of this 124 euros, but this year. So yeah, I just wanted to exchange about that, if that's okay.
Hannah, may I?
Yeah, go ahead, and I will add too.
Actually, I've seen what you wrote, and I already wanted to write you, take my email and contact me because I think there's a potential in us connecting. Unfortunately, inclusion is still not implanted everywhere, and it is an extra effort because, on one hand, we talk a lot about inclusion, but on the other hand, there's a lot of out there which is just not inclusive because our society is not built like that. So also the organizations who do and organize these kind of trainings, they do need to do the extra step to say, we want to be inclusive. And then with the question, what does it mean? I had, due to time, skip a lot of things, but inclusion isn't then an add-on. Then I have to plan the whole thing, and then I have to have a good venue, and it isn't, or I can say rather from my experience, it's very rare that you have really good accessible places out there. So of course, yeah, it is a challenge, and you are actually highlighting a big topic which is out there, and which is, of course, with what the Erasmus Plus does, what Salto Inclusion does, what Salto Youth does. It is all the time talking and doing inclusive projects hopefully gets more and more people infected to to really think about inclusion from the beginning and to implement it on every level. Because of course, when I book the venue, I don't know who's coming, but I have to know that I should already, even though I don't know who's coming, book a venue which has these opportunities to invite people and involve people who have different access needs, right? So, yeah, it should be nicer, but I hopefully you take my email and write me an email, and then we will get in contact and see.
Great. Thank you. I have actually another question, but I just don't want to take too much space, if that's fine. I am going to have an intervention to promote a mobility project, and I think the target audience will be students with special needs, with disabilities. And because I'm not part of an organization, I'm not sure which contact to give them, because I don't want to sell them the dreams of you can do this, you can do this. And also in France, I am near Paris. I mean, we have big problem regarding accessibility. So do you think it's better to advise them to contact the sending organization, or maybe the inclusion officer of the national agency?
Thank you for your questions. Before answering your last one, I would like to go to still add to the one before, because it's actually well, Ellie already described it quite well. Not everyone still thinks of inclusivity from the beginning on. So sometimes it's even with the inclusion support in the programs. If everything is already planned, it might not be possible to do these kind of adjustments. On the training calendar, you can find offers from the national agencies and the Salto resource centers. So for those, you should always be able to, in the application form, mention your needs, and the events should be adjusted to those. But there's also offers from other organizations where we, of course, do not have any influence on these aspects. But that's also why we do these promotions to show people that it's really important to plan inclusively from the beginning on, even before you know who might join, so that everyone can really join. As for your other question, I'm not quite sure. So I think I haven't understood quite well this group of persons with disabilities you mentioned. You would like to tell them that they can participate in youth exchanges in general. Is that correct?
European, well, ESC, European Solidarity course, because I am going to give a testimony of my own experience.
Yes.
And also youth exchanges, although I haven't been in youth exchanges yet because I am too old. And basically, I want to encourage them to take part in these programs. But if they ask for a specific contact, I mean, the French National Agency is quite difficult to contact. And also, I am also aware there are big accessibility problem in France. So should maybe they ask the sending organization first? So, okay, I have a disability, I would like to do an ESC, is it possible? Or maybe a contact inclusion officer. I know it's tricky because it's like French situation, but it's just, I don't want to tell them you can do that and then they just find themselves. It's just too complicated.
Absolutely. Yeah. I absolutely see your point. And it's actually a tricky question because there's still lack of infrastructure, let's say, or of places to turn to that can then delegate to other places. Like we have Eurodesk, and I already posted the link in the chat as well. Eurodesk has information centers in all the program countries and also regional contact points, and they advise especially young persons about their opportunities. But the organizations that offer inclusive volunteering opportunities are still quite rare. So even the Eurodesk centers do not always have these kind of contacts or overviews. Usually us as national agencies, we don't do this kind of counseling because, as I said, that's Eurodesk. But I can only speak for our case here. I sometimes, as an inclusion officer, get questions either from sending organizations or also from youngsters or families if I know about volunteering opportunities. And in these cases, I try to answer because I know there's not a lot of places to turn to. In Germany, there's an organization that also counsels on opportunities for persons with disabilities, or did counsel because it was a project. So yeah, there's definitely a lack. I know that what has worked before is to turn to a big sending organization and say, hey, I'm using a wheelchair. I would really like to go abroad. Do you have opportunities? That's how actually the projects for the deaf volunteers in Germany started, because there was a deaf young girl who asked, I really want to do volunteering services. Would you send me? And they did. And now they offer opportunities every year, sending and especially hosting as well. So that can be an incentive, but I know it's a lot to ask also from the youngsters because they have to put in an extra effort, and they might also get a no, sorry, we don't provide this service, or we don't offer this kind of services. But yeah, I would still recommend to contact Eurodesk.
Yeah.
In your experience, Hanna, as the inclusion officer at the national agency, is the reason why not many projects consider involving people with different abilities purely technical and financial, or rather that they're not aware that this is a possibility? And how do you somehow, because you are also responsible for the inclusion strategy implementation from your national agency, what in practice can be done that more organizations feel incentivized and more prepared to do projects that are more accessible? And I also wouldn't want us to sound as if we are selling the idea of do inclusive projects, because I think if organizations are not ready to, they shouldn't be incentivized for it, right, financially. But what is the strategy? How to make sure that more organizations consider to really reach out to groups that are left behind?
That's the question I actually deal with in my daily work. So one of the big questions for us as inclusion officers. There's several answers to that because there's different situations. So one thing is that certainly organizations that already do inclusive youth work, or that work with specific target groups, for example, disability organizations or migrant organizations, they often don't know about the program activities or opportunities, about the funding opportunities, and or they often also lack capacities to do these big project applications or get acquainted with the funding mechanisms, etc. So for one thing, we try to really inform these organizations about the opportunities and support them with first applications, etc. So that the ones that already do have the connections with the relevant target groups find their way into the programs. Then there's the ones that are willing, definitely willing, and also prepared to work inclusively, but that really don't know about the funding opportunities. So that's why also events like this one are really important to show that there is also money to it. And it's absolutely true. It's not only money. There's so much effort behind effort and attitude, etc. But money is a big topic. So we try to inform more about these funding mechanisms. And then a third part is certainly trying to do some advocating for inclusive youth work. So try to mainstream inclusion in youth work and in the European youth work. And it's quite sure that not everyone will be able to reach everyone. That's maybe also not the main aim, but invite people to think or reflect on who they do reach with their programs and projects, who is left out, what kind of barriers there are to participate in their projects, and where they can maybe work on these barriers and try to overcome them and reach a more diverse range of young persons.
Elin, how do you do that in practice? Like, what would be maybe your biggest secret that you're successfully doing it for 20 years now? And where is maybe the magic stick that you're holding?
One of the biggest secrets is, of course, when you do it once or twice successfully and you get people feeling it, then you actually have young people who are going and telling other people and involving them again. This is for sure one of the magics. And when I look here on these pictures, there's one person among them actually who came like this. There's a young participant who were in my project, and she's now one of my very important translators. So hello, Romana. And so this is for sure. So there is she has brought so many new people and organizations already through the process into the project. But on the other hand, it's like going, I agree with Hannah. So these kind of events, like where especially when you meet people face to face and you talk and then you explain and then you discover you do this and you do that and then you connect with people. It's basically, I think one of these magics is to always have it a little bit in mind what you're doing and drop it at here and there, because there's a lot of people out there who don't know it. Young people who never heard about the opportunities of going somewhere, doing something, but also organizations, parents, teachers, whoever. There's a lot of people, more people who haven't heard about these opportunities than who have heard. And when you share the news and spread the news, then you often get people involved, and then it spreads. It's a multiplier effect, how you call it.
Thank you very much, and really thank you for coming and spreading this vital information. I hope that our audience online and our audience of the recorded video will also take something out of this talk today in a very practical, implementable manner. Yeah. So now is this moment of our ID talk that sometimes we forget, but is much anticipated. This is the moment when we all forget that there is Olaja in the background doing a graphic recording, but she was, even in this very challenging circumstances today. And we are ready to share those with you.
Yes, great. My internet is not great today. So yeah, great look on all these measures that are in place in all the European youth programs. So I tried to gather all the information, including the very specific details that are very useful actually for the organizations and for those who are starting to look into this. So yeah, this is my summary of today's talk, and the final version will come very soon.
Thank you very much, Ola. And I think for Hannah and Deli, this is also a good souvenir of a group portrait painted by you. We are close to finishing today's ID talk. I would like to now pass the word back to Eli and Hannah to say some maybe final words of encouragement and goodbye before we close today's ID talks.
Yeah, I can only encourage to really make use of the mechanisms that are there for inclusion and diversity within the programs, and to use the programs also as tools for inclusive youth work. We all know they are not perfect. There are still quite some barriers, but they already offer quite some opportunities, and this funding of 100% of inclusion costs is really something I think special, yeah, we love to see that this funding is used in a good way for real good inclusive projects.
I would have shared even more on this whole topic of administration with you, because there's so much more. But I promise all the knowledge which was not shared here, there will be an article which I will then place there, so you still can read it, and recommend you to have a look and engage in inclusion, where there's a lot of tips from the practice on these different topics. And what I think is like, it is an enormous privilege that we have the opportunity, and not many projects and programs support inclusion funding as well as the Erasmus Plus. So it is an amazing opportunity to try it out. And I know people are often afraid. It might be the money, it might be the not enough experience. But what I think in inclusion is, besides that it's not an add-on and it should be done like from the beginning, but it is a step-by-step process. It doesn't mean you have to go out, find all the people who are missing, have to accommodate all the spaces to all of their needs. Do it step by step. You reach one of them, you adapt, then you learn something, you do the next step, then you bring those people together. So it's not like, it is absolutely okay to go step by step, and you never will fit them all in one space. So slowly is also good, but important is we do it, because we need to transform digital society in a more inclusive, more diverse and justice one.
Thank you. Thank you very much for being with us today. And thank you to our audience on Facebook. It's very rare that you stay with us until the very end. We will see each other again with the ID Talks in 2 weeks from today, where we will be talking about inclusive design of learning programs. So come back and stay tuned. And remember, you will soon get a follow-up email with all the resources connected to today's talk. Thank you very much, Ellie and Hannah, again, and goodbye to everybody.